So, you want to work in fashion, but what you may not realize is there are a lot of fashion jobs outside of being a designer. Now, I know design may seem super glamorous and sexy, but a lot of these jobs are just as fun and just as exciting. And there are also two big reasons why these jobs are arguably better than working in design. I'm Heidi, founder of SuccessfulFashionDesigner.com, and I teach designers like you the real world skills that you won't learn in fashion school, but that you need to get ahead in this cutthroat industry. A lot of people don't talk about this stuff, which is why I call it Fashion Industry Secrets Revealed. Now, there are more than 7 jobs out there besides being a designer, but these are the jobs you never knew existed. I'm not going to tell you the obvious ones like being a buyer or being a retail store manager. I'm going to tell you the cool jobs that, unless you work in the industry, you have no idea exist. First up is a CAD designer. CAD stands for Computer Aided Design. So yes, you will be spending a lot of time on the computer. It's kind of like a mix of fashion design and graphic design. You're responsible for sketching fashion flats in Illustrator. Oftentimes this will be interpreted from what the designer gives you. You'll be creating textile prints and repeating patterns. Any of the graphical elements that go on or inside the product, things like labels and hang tags, are going to be part of your job. This may be things like placed prints, like screen printed graphics on the front of shirts, or cute artsy things on the side of leggings. And yes, as I just mentioned, this is also going to be graphics for things like hang tags and labels and zipper pulls and trims. You have to create all of these from scratch, which is really freaking fun. Fashion job number 2, technical designer or garment technician. Your main role as a technical designer is turning a 2D sketch into a 3-dimensional finished garment. This doesn't necessarily mean sewing in real life, but your job is to make sure that the garment is constructed accurately and that it fits well in every size. Depending on the brand you work for, this may or may not mean draping actual fabric and drafting actual patterns. Some brands do sew samples on site. Some brands have seamstresses in-house to do this. Some brands, this will be the responsibility of the technical designer. Not always. A lot of the time, the technical designer will still do everything on paper and send it to the factory to have them create the sample. At the very least, as a technical designer, you will be creating the chart of POMs, which are the points of measure that show what measurement each portion of the garment should be for any given size. One of the biggest tasks as a technical designer is to conduct fittings of the samples that the factory sends you. This is to make sure that the garment fits right, that the seam lines and construction are done accurately, and that it works on a real person's body. You'll go through these fittings, do an inside-out analysis of the garment, looking at every seam and stitch, and you'll document all these comments and send them back to the factory to let them know any changes they need to make. If you love problem solving and engineering and building stuff, a technical designer is an amazing job for you. Fashion job number 3, product developer. As a product developer, your role and responsibility is to manage the entire product development process. This goes from the time the tech pack is sent out to the factory to the time the bulk production lands at the warehouse or at your facility. You need to make sure that development stays on time, you need to make sure that the factory sends submits on time, and you need to make sure that all deadlines are going to be met. You'll be responsible for the initial sourcing, which is where you send the tech pack out to multiple factories and get quotes. You'll be responsible for negotiating pricing and payment terms and delivery dates with various factories. And once the final factory has been chosen for production, you'll be responsible to work with them throughout the entire process. Now, I've talked about this in other videos, but the product development process is full of a lot of tracking and following up with the factory to make sure that everything's done on time. It is your job at any given time to know the status of every garment and design, every individual piece and part of that garment. What's the status of the buttons, the hang tags, the labels, the fabric, the screen print? As the factory develops all of these individual components for the finished garment, they will send them to you, and you are the one responsible to review them, send comments, and let them know whether they're approved or not, or if they need to make changes. You'll also work with the technical designer as the various fit samples come in to make sure that the comments are made and sent to the factory in a timely manner. Again, your entire job is essentially tracking and managing the whole development process to make sure deadlines are met. If you are super organized, you love coordinating a bunch of moving pieces and parts, and you're good at communication and staying on top of things, a product developer is an awesome job for you. Fashion job number 4, a merchandiser. Now, this is different from a visual merchandiser, which we're going to talk about next. But a merchandiser within a brand has a very specific role. The job of a merchandiser is to figure out what should the overall assortment look like. So what does this mean? This means, should the collection have 3 dresses, 1 pair of pants, 2 blouses, and 1 jacket? Is there something missing from that assortment? Does it need a sweater? Does it need a jumpsuit? Does it need a trench coat? You will work very close with the designer and the design team. While they will be designing the individual garments, it is your job to analyze past season sales, review other competitors in the market, and see where there are opportunities and what makes sense in terms of how many of each type of item to introduce. If you still want to work in design, but want to sort of have a 10,000-foot overview of it versus designing the individual pieces, a merchandiser is a great job for you. Fashion job number 5, visual merchandiser. You may also know this as a stylist. As a visual merchandiser, your job is to style the insides of the store. This may be a table display. This may be a wall display. This may be a window display. You're going to figure out how to take various pieces within the store and put them together cohesively. This also can consist of things outside of just the clothes. You can have the opportunity to do really sort of crafty, fun, engineer design type of things that complement and enhance the visual display. And you also may, depending on the company, depending on the brand, be in charge of doing visual styling for photo shoots. Things like flat lays, putting various models in different clothes and making sure everybody looks good together. As a visual merchandiser, your job essentially is taking different clothes and figuring out how to put them all together in one cohesive way. Again, whether that's on a group of models or an in-store display. If you love mixing and matching and putting a ton of different stuff together to create the perfect and best outfits, a visual merchandiser or stylist is a great job for you. Fashion job number 6, a sourcing specialist. First, what is sourcing? Sourcing is finding the right vendors who have the right materials, things like fabric, trims, findings, or the right capabilities, meaning the right machinery or factories to create your designs. As a sourcing specialist, you're always going to be looking for new vendors and partners to work with. It may be because they have unique trims and findings and fabrics that you've never seen before. It may be because they have specialized machinery that allows you to do interesting construction techniques that can help your brand stand out from the competition. You're also going to be looking for factories that have the right price points and fit into the price margins that your brand needs. As a sourcing specialist, your job is also to find factories that can fulfill your minimum order requirements. Not every factory will create 200 units, and not every factory has the capability of creating 200,000 units. So depending on the size of your brand, you may need to find factories that have the right production capabilities for you. Now, as a brand, it's important to have multiple factories that you can work with. Not only because you may need to fill in gaps in production when one factory can't perform, you have a backup to send that to, but it also helps keep your vendors competitive. When you counter source something, meaning you send it to 3 factories to get 3 quotes, there's competition there, and that helps you push the factories to give you the best price possible. Outside of finding new factories to meet your brand needs, you're also going to be responsible for communicating with the factories, maintaining the relationships, negotiating pricing, negotiating payment and delivery terms. You are going to be the front person working with the factory and maintaining that relationship. If you love doing research, discovering new resources, and communicating and maintaining relationships with people, being a sourcing specialist is a great job for you. Fashion job number 7, a customs compliance coordinator. When product gets designed and made at the factory, someone has to make sure it gets from the country of origin, wherever it's made, whether that's China or India or anywhere else to the country where it's going to be sold and distributed. And the logistics of shipping hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of garments across the world are not super easy. You don't just throw the product on a plane and it shows up on the warehouse doorstep 3 days later. Shipping product by air is very expensive. The average cost you're going to incur is an additional $1 per item. That's per item, per jacket, per t-shirt. It's going to cost an extra $1 to put that on an airplane, which is why most product is brought in on a boat. Fun side fact, if you've ever heard the saying, slow boat from China, there's a meaning behind it. On average, the product will sit on the boat, on the water, anywhere from 30 to 45 days, depending on the origin and the final destination. Now, to get the product onto the boat, there's a lot of things that have to be considered. First, all those jackets go into a box. The box goes onto a pallet. The pallet goes into a shipping container, and the shipping container goes onto the boat. This entire process has to be coordinated because you may not have enough product to fill an entire pallet or to fill an entire shipping container. And so it has to get coordinated with lots of other brands and lots of other product that's being shipped across the world to fit your designs, your box of jackets or shirts onto the boat. So there's a couple things that happen when product gets brought into a country. It has to pass through customs, and they have to make sure that you're paying the right amount of duty or tariff or tax on that product. Now, there are thousands of categories for different types of products. They're called HTS codes, and the duty, the tax, is calculated based on the category. Some garments may have duty of 2%, meaning if the garment's $1, the duty is 2 cents. Some garments have a duty of up to 30 or 35%, meaning an additional 35 cents for every dollar. So as you might guess, some brands decide they want to put their garment into a different HTS code to get a lower duty. This is major cheating. You will get caught, you will pay, and your product will get held up in customs for weeks or days or months, which is why as a customs compliance coordinator, it is your job to be familiar with the HTS codes, to assign the correct one, to pay the right duty, and to get the product smoothly through customs. So, if you love problem solving, dealing with challenging situations, and figuring out logistics and coordination, a customs compliance coordinator is a great job for you. So again, I know when you think about working in fashion, all you think about is being a designer. But as I told you earlier, there are 2 reasons why it is great to explore one of these other jobs instead of being a designer. Reason 1, they are much less competitive to get. You still get to work in the industry. You still get to be amongst fashion. It is still very exhilarating and exciting, but your chances of landing your first job, getting your second and third job, advancing, getting promotions, all of that stuff are much higher than you are when you're working as a designer. As a result, you will also get paid more. Some of these jobs pay even double what you'll make as a designer. Why? Again, because they're not as competitive. There are hundreds, thousands, millions of people out there dying to be a designer, so brands get away with paying fairly low salaries. In comparison, these are 7 other awesome fashion jobs you can get that pay more and are still super fun. Now, if you're curious what it's like to be a designer on a day-to-day basis, I made a video about that. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, click the subscribe button and please give me a thumbs up. For more free tips, tutorials, and advice on getting ahead in fashion, head on over to successfulfashiondesigner.com and sign up to my email list for exclusive insights I only share there. I'd also love to hear from you. What is your dream fashion job? Let me know below in the comments. Now, there are more than 7 jobs out there to work in. Beef. Who says beef? First thing. Your first thing.